Hello, everybody. Welcome to another virtual DDD session with a great list of people. And this evening, I'm your moderator, and I hope it will be a very interesting discussion. It will be surely a very colorful one. And I just would like to jump in and give you to present the opportunity to present yourself, because it's easier that way, I think. Jessica, you are the first one on my Zoom list.
Okay, I'm Jessica Kerr, developer and semathicist. I'm Jessitron on Twitter and jessitron.com, and I've been talking about systems for years now. So I'm really happy to be talking with all of you today.
Great, thank you. Who wants to jump in next? Rebecca, maybe?
Sure, I'm Rebecca Wirfs-Brock, co-inventor of responsibility-driven design, and we had CRC cards back then in the ancient last millennia, and class responsibility collaborations, well, the same goes for people too, and I really care about how people and systems build trust and create, I'm going to say, an environment where we as developers, as engagers with systems, can really, have an experience that is more than just being part of the machine. So I'm really happy to be here to talk about things today with the rest of you.
Thank you. Next one, Trond. Let's mix a bit.
Yes, Trond Hjorteland here. I'm normally working as an architect or specializing in architecture when working with teams, but I suspect that that's not why I'm in this group. I have a keen interest in figuring out better ways, not only to how we work together, but also how we organize ourselves and teams and organizations. So I spent way more time than I should have probably in social technical systems, looking into that. So that's probably where I'm going to participate today, is on those aspects.
Thank you. So, Ruth.
Hi, I'm Ruth Malan. I, like others, I'm here because of my interest in socio-technical systems and teams and leadership. Thinking about creating socio-technical systems within socio-technical systems. Everything applies.
Thank you. Dawn, I think you are next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dawn Ahukanna. Just call me Dawn, that'd be fine. And I'm here because I'm literally approaching this problem from the other end of the spectrum, started focusing on human experiences with systems, and occurred to me, why don't we just design them to be something that is part of one system instead of two separate pillars and then keep bashing them together? So I'm really looking forward to the conversation and with all the other people here on the call about, in hindsight and knowing what we know, what and how would we create a system, human, planetary, everybody collaborative system. That's me. That's all.
If that's all, then it's okay. It's easy. We solve it in 5 minutes. But Matthias, you are next one.
Right. I work with Artling. We're a small consultancy, and we're mostly focused on software modeling and design and strategy. But of course, none of these things work if you don't look at, team organization and product vision and business vision. So we're always looking outwards and then turning back into software design and models and those things. So yeah, and I'm here because the guest list is amazing. But thank you, Christina, for also giving me a moment to talk about DDD Europe. let me share that. We're back in Amsterdam in June. We have workshops, June 20th and onwards, the conference on Thursday and Friday. And on Wednesday, we have DDD Foundations, which is a sub-conference of 1 day, 2 tracks, where it's mostly about existing practices in DDD, implementing DDD. I don't know if you can read it well, but it's all on the website, the program. So starting with modeling, starting with introducing it in your organization, some coding stuff, some mapping, some modeling, all these kind of topics. So focused on people who are new to DDD or who are trying to introduce it in their organization. And the reason I'm telling you all this is because I have 5 tickets to raffle. And so here's the thing you need to do if you're listening. My friend has been running an event storming session today and all week, I think. And the question is how many people were in it? And you just email your answer before, let's say, this time tomorrow to contact@ddeurope.com, and then you can win a ticket. The reason, of course, I'm asking this question is because it's not a typical number. That's the only hint I'm going to give you. Yeah, that's it. So thanks, and maybe see you at DDD Europe.
Thank you. I'm really curious. I have to find out this number. Okay, great. I hope in the meantime we all set. So let's jump in. Dawn, what would you say to start it?
Well, okay, we didn't necessarily have a set of questions organized, but I think it would be giving everybody 5-ish minutes to kind of go around and answer, to start off the conversation, the question, what does collaboration mean to you? And Jessica, I'm going to put you on the spot here. So, sorry, and start with you.
Okay, what does collaboration mean to me? I think collaboration looks different at various levels of a system. So starting at the smallest in our software teams, that would be the software itself. I think for the software to be collaborative, it needs to handle errors well. It needs to like gracefully degrade in the case it's collaborators, like its dependencies aren't working so well. It needs to be observable to talk to the people who are taking care of it. Okay, so moving up to that level, the people in a software team, for that collaboration, I think really means it means being able to count on each other. And it means having an amount of shared knowledge and context that makes communication really smooth, because every change a member of a team makes to the software or the documentation or anything affects everyone else. So collaboration there is really, there's a lot of talking to each other and a lot of developing shared norms and a shared language. That shared language, if we can do that consciously, is really huge. But then if you look at like between teams, I think collaboration looks a lot different because it can't be that high bandwidth. So you do need like personal relationships spanning all the gaps. But one of the things that I read about systems like the other day is that good systems have clear boundaries, but not impermeable boundaries. So you know when you're crossing a team boundary, you know when you're affecting someone else's code, but that doesn't mean you never affect it. That doesn't mean you never change the interface, but you know when you're doing it. Then as we scale up, I don't know, I haven't thought about that much today.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, but I do think it's very important to recognize that what is transparency, what is trust, what is collaboration looks very different as you get into higher levels, to larger parts of the system. It's always federated and it's just not the same everywhere.
So if I was going to summarize what you're saying is it's the same thing, but it looks different depending on where it's practiced and who is practicing it.
Also that Yeah, don't expect it to look the same, but working together is working together, and working together smoothly is a concept everywhere. But don't expect the same techniques to work at every level. Your software emits events and you get graphs. If your teams are doing that, not as useful. It's really accurate in the software. It's only a clue at the team level.
Right. Cool. All right. Trond, question to you.
Well, yeah, it is a big question, to be honest. Actually, I want to pick up on what you just said, Jessica. It's about the boundaries, because I want to come from that. I just came from Stockholm doing my good fences make good neighbors talk, and the idea behind using that proverb, it's just that you have the boundaries are important between the teams. It's actually more important as a social boundary than a technical boundary, but it shouldn't be a wall, as you said. It should be permanent boundary, definitely. But it should be quite clear what that is, because if we're going to be good neighbors, if the teams are going to be good neighbors, it should be very clear who's doing what and who's responsible for what, who's having which goals and stuff like that. And that brings me into the next idea, which has sort of brewing in me last few weeks, actually. Because looking deeper into social technical system theory, specifically that open system theory from the Emorys, is that when you're doing in that model, you don't do a small change in some parts of the organization. You do a holistic, radical change of the whole organization, and everybody has to be in on that change. And also because the boundaries are different than we probably, at least how I've seen them up until now. And that is that the teams are probably a lot bigger than we think, because they have to be responsible for a lot more. They have to be self-governing, not self-management, but actually self-governing, which means they have to be able to set their own goals for something. Actually, the design that they do as part of the techniques that sort of have been developed in that area, name 2 is the Search Conference and the participative design workshop. And all of them are based on goals. So, and that is a self-organizing around those goals. And if you, so you can actually modelize your system, your whole system based on that. Say there is a set of goals that you all agree on. We want to, this is our cyber future. This is the action plan that we agree we're going to work towards. And then the teams self-organize around those goals. And then I think the teams will be a lot bigger. But it wouldn't be a flat organization. It would be a hierarchical organization, at least in a semi-large, medium to large organization. So what you said, Jessica, there are layers there. But it's important that the layers are negotiations between peers. There's no team telling other teams how to do their job. There is no power over. It's all a power with. So this everything here is negotiation between peers, even within the team, of course, that's a negotiation as well, but also across teams. It's there is if there's something that pops up in one team, for example, we want to do some change, or we think this strategy is wrong or whatever, they have to negotiate with the rest of the organization. So so that is a very interesting avenue that I think I'm seeing sort of the image of, at least somewhat. Yes.
Okay. All right. Handing the ball over to Rebecca.
So I've spent 20 years hanging out with a bunch of Agile folks. And one of the things that they talk about, and I say they because I'm always an outsider in any group I'm part of, is the notion of a whole team. And when I think about that, there's some implicit biases that people have when they come to that term. They think perhaps whole team means everyone works on the same thing at the same time, therefore we are aligned. That could be one bias. Another bias is if you're not part of the whole team, you are the other, and therefore you have no, let's say, reason to interact with us. And if you do, we don't necessarily believe that you really understand us as part of the team. And I find that this notion of whole teams is an ideal, is an aspirational kind of thing, but that in the world of complex systems or understanding longer term and shorter term visions of where we're going, that there are people that do have, I'm going to say, boundaries. They're fluid across boundaries. So the role of architects, the role of people who care about systems qualities, the role of people who care about user experience, experimentation. I could go on, but sometimes this notion of interacting with others that are not part of the day-to-day team has been a real challenge. Various methods and practices that people say, well, oh, they really shouldn't exist, those people. Let's all be T-shaped people and we can all do what we can do together and we don't need them folks. Or they're just difficult to deal with. And I tend to think that if we're really trying to collaborate across different skill sets and different concerns, that we need to be inclusive of folks that are not necessarily every day working with us side by side. So I'll just leave it at that.
Alrighty. Matthias.
Classic mistake, muted. I just Googled a snarky tweet that I wrote a while back. Let me put it on the screen. It says, it was, well, I guess I was a bit frustrated that day, but it says everybody wants autonomy, but also alignment. We want to move fast, but we don't want to duplicate any efforts, right? Everything should be dry. We want shared abstractions, but we don't want to spend the time on collaborative modeling. We want to focus on the user, but everybody wants to build a platform. And we want to move fast and break things. But if something actually breaks, then, let's blame somebody. So what I'm really trying to say here is that I feel like often we talk about these things that we want, autonomy and alignment, but we never really think of them in terms of costs and trade-offs. It's just sort of, they're all things we want, right? We just accept them as givens that we all want these things. There's nothing bad in here. Well, no collaborative modeling maybe was a bad thing, but maybe that's something that has started to bug me in recent weeks, that or bug me more, I don't know, that we don't treat this as sort of a system problem. We just want to, let's just tell people to do more of this. Let's just reorganize once again. There's people are having reorganization fatigue, but the next reorganization will fix everything. I think we also maybe underestimate, like we're going to, I'm of course coming from the system point of view, where a lot of people we work with, they have huge legacy systems that they cannot move, and a team reorganization is sort of the only tool that managers have at a certain level. They cannot really touch the system itself. So these things are always, I'm not going to say easy, right? But it's easier to convince people of doing that, and it's like maybe an effort of a few weeks, and then, but the system itself doesn't get the memo, right? Oh, we've been reorganized. Well, your software doesn't care. It's still deeply coupled and dependent on everything in ways you don't even know. So maybe another way of saying this is that Conway's law, we're treating it is a law, but it's maybe only defined in the context of new systems. If we reorganize in the hope, the reverse Conway maneuver, to get the system we want, it's not going to happen instantly if your system already exists. So I think the law could be maybe even rephrased as that the system will mimic your communication structures if the flexibility of the system is sufficiently high, or maybe, I don't know, maybe you could even quantify that higher than the flexibility of your organization or something like that, but I'm not sure about that. I haven't thought about it. Anyway, that's just something I thought of.
Very, very, very interesting, and I love the tweet. Ruth. Over to you.
Yeah, so at sort of the obvious and essential level, we collaborate to get something done that's bigger than we can do by ourselves. So that's obvious, but it brings with it all so the good and difficulty of working together, of sort of the good. We need that attention. We need that extra attention span and bandwidth to do more. So we're bringing time, attention, experience, but also different perspectives, different backgrounds, different ways of being creative, different ways of working together, so different mental models that we then, if we think of collaboration as Jessica mentioned this with respect to the technical system, but in the organizational, in the interpersonal conversations that where we combine experience and knowledge to create something new, something that individually we don't have, aren't going to get to individually. But do because of the conversations between us and artifacts between us that we each other produce, but also conversations between the people collaborating. So that brings in notions of requisite variety, and we need sort of variety to respond to variety in our context, in the systems that our system serves. And then that brings in sort of requisite coherence and how we create that requisite coherence, and what does requisite mean and what does coherence mean?
Okay, Katrina, I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot and ask you the same question. I know you're the moderator, but
I was burning to answer, but I kept myself. Almost after everyone, I wanted to say something, but I was very disciplined. I'm very proud of me today because all these points are so true. But I would go back to Jessica, and you said, actually, Don, your conclusion that collaboration is the same. I don't think it's the same. I think in a small company with 20 people, it's something totally different as in one of 500. Because of all the rest, what you said, boundaries, different focus, different. We have a lot of different groups and collaboration in big companies. You have groups around architecture, groups around user journey, groups in diverse way, because you need it. In 20, 50, 100%, maybe you don't need this to make this boundaries so clear, because you are talking with the same person with 3 heads, architect and backend developer and what else, I don't know. So it's not needed, but in big companies, exactly for what Matthias said, everybody is expecting that it's working. Shine in your organization, so it will be perfect. It won't. it never will work out for the start. It will come chaos, and then maybe if it was the right reorganization, it could work out. But you will surely have more collaboration. More empowerment needs more things done by ourselves. Nobody will do it. I don't want a manager, so I have to do it myself. This is maybe where with the small copyright text or something, everybody should tell this. If starting a reorganization, it belongs to the truth. It will be more work. I will have more happier, me for my part, but not everybody. But it will mean more work. So collaboration, I think it's the act of collaboration is the same, sure. But the requisites and the constraints and the rules, we need surely very clear rules in a bigger chaotic a big organization will be different.
So I'd like to add, because I think the thing that I thought that was interesting is everybody described collaboration from a particular perspective, and it was reflected in all of that. But I want to be a little, if you like, a little incendiary here, and I went and as I always do, I go and have a look at the word. I'm interested in the etymology, where it came from, because that gives you some impression of how we got to that. And collaboration, even as a noun, not just a verb, has a positive and a negative meaning. The positive meaning, in both cases, we're doing stuff together. What you are doing together is what makes it positive or negative. So a popular use of collaboration or collaborators was during conflict, world wars. They were the people that you wanted to go and find and punish, because they perpetuated that conflict and world war and partnered with the people who were inflicting that pain on everyone. On the flip side, collaboration is where we come together and we do common good. So it's really, to me, one of those things that is spectral. It's like visible light. There's green, there's red, there's orange, there's yellow. It's all light, different frequencies, and we've banded them together. The boundaries are a little fuzzy. They are definitely impermeable, but taking a lesson from biomimicry, it's almost like, okay, one of the things I think nature is just trying to tell us over and over and over again is everything is connected, everything's on a spectrum, and we spend a lot of our time trying to define and slot them into definitions that we see, but we need to also have definitions that we all see and we all agree with, and then there's overlap and then there's layers. So it's a three-dimensional shape with fuzzy boundaries, spectral, and positive and negative, just to make it really complicated. So I don't know, Christina, if there's any questions from the audience.
Ooh, Rebecca has her hand up.
Okay, if not, we'll go to Rebecca.
I just had a very short point to make, is that I was aware of that dual nature of collaboration. And because I'm very much into dictionary definitions, when we read our first object design book. And I tend to think that that duality of like collaborating with the enemy as opposed to collaborating with trust is something to really be aware of. We all assume, you know, if we're in the biased world of whole teams, that everyone is in the same, I'm going to say, camp, you know, in the group. But the trust building, even if there are rules, as Christina is talking about, or, you know, how do we work with other people, the norms of a company, we have to be aware that there is this duality, and be very careful of not projecting our emotions onto others when we're collaborating. And in some sense, in particular, if you have a sense of power or authority and you're not aware of that, you can be quite intimidating to some collaborator that is maybe not so secure in their interactions with you. So anyway, yeah, I was aware of that duality. And I think in software design, it's important to realize that, you know, within, if you could identify trust regions within your software, you could make it so that error handling and things are done at the borders and boundaries, but you have to really consciously think about that, at least at that level. And at this human level, boy, it's even harder.
Any reactions or comments or questions to everything that's been said? Okay, Trond.
Yeah, just a little comment to what just Rebecca just said, because I heard not long ago, I think it was an evolutionary biologist who said it, that a hormone, I think it was oxytocin or something, that triggers empathy in us. actually also trigger outside aggression towards others. So that duality is really there. It's actually built into us by that effect. It's really interesting. Just a comment.
Really interesting.
Sorry, go ahead.
It means we could work on this empathy part. Okay, good to know.
Yes, can we trigger that by having Zoom conversations?
Yeah, exactly.
Sure.
But the interesting thing is that the same effect, that if you increase the empathy, you actually also create the bigger divide to others, which is an interesting aspect of it. Us against them kind of thing.
Yeah, and Rebecca talked about the whole teams and the people wanting to be T-shaped and we can do it all. But you can't do it all because your job is a subsystem. And that subsystem that you're building is useless. And your web page and this other web page are coupled to each other, if nothing else, at the user. There is design. Someone has to think at a wider level.
Welcome to my talk on structured event storming. Event storming is a workshop process for discovering domains, data flows, actors.
Thank you. Sorry, keep going, Jessica. You were making a point.
Oh, that was it. That was it. That just a whole team of a subsystem cannot know everything and get everything right at a wider level.
So what does okay, the conversation started with collaboration, and part of what we're going to cover is how would you, or what would you consider designing a team who's going to create the system, who's going to be affected by the system? What are things that with what you know today, yes, it won't be perfect, what considerations would you make? And this is open to everybody, unless Christina, if you can wave if you've got any questions from the audience, that'd be great. But yeah, well, open to everybody, so feel free to jump in.
Can I throw in what is called a torch? I don't know what you call it in English, but we call that
put fire in the okay.
Is that if you say to a team, you don't communicate well enough, you're not motivated enough, you create too much errors, to stuff like that. I would challenge that is, yes, you could probably send them to training for collaboration training, stuff like that. Maybe you could send them to motivational courses and stuff like that. But are you really fixing the problem? Or is there a systemic problem underneath there? I think the latter, to be honest. So when it comes to collaboration, if there is a collaboration issue, look at what is the underlying cause for that collaboration issue. Is it because they are not in the same team, for example? Is it because they do different things, but within the same team, so they argue? But yeah, it's the kind of different things that actually trigger that lack of collaboration, if you like.
So the things that affect collaboration are symptomatic, not necessarily the cause. That's interesting. So how would you, just to put you on the spot, Trond, how would you address or try and mitigate against that? And now,
darn, that's the risk of saying the crazy things. No, actually, that came up after reading some new material from Malan Henry, because it is, and also some I saw Aikoff talked about in one of his lectures, is that there's a lot of things that we think are sensible things to do that are actually anti-systemic. Like, for example, value stream enhancements and trying to figure out better ways to working and all that stuff. It actually is anti-systemic, but because there are probably other reasons why things doesn't work. And Emery's approach is, of course, that there is a dominant hierarchy here, and people need to work together and self-organize. Then you back to that sort of idea, and that there is no dominance anymore. And that people self-organize around things, because then in the so-called DP2 style, that would sort of it would emerge from the team. It would be natural for the team to collaborate because they have the same goal, the same purpose that they share.
I think
that's a short answer.
Okay, thank you, Trond. I might have interrupted someone Was
well, I was going to react to the the systemic problems. I think most teams in most organizations are simply created because there were people available and there was a problem to be solved and somebody had a budget for it, and that's how it starts first, and then it's now we have to solve problems with this team, which is obviously the opposite way of going about it. And then, well, Alexei said something in chat that I want to read out loud. You aren't collaborating enough is the most generic outcome of any retrospective meeting, and it means utterly nothing. But it's like it's blaming, right? Oh, we just put you together, and here's a problem, and oh, you also have to deal with these other teams that are also working on parts of this thing, and now go and collaborate. And yeah, I think that it's difficult, right? Because the solution is treating all of that as a design problem and saying we need design-minded people to design how we're going to collaborate and how teams and all of these things. And there's great stuff out there about it, but the people in charge are not designers necessarily. They don't have that mindset. They are managers, and we need them because the designers don't want to be managers. I'm generalizing, of course, but they're probably not there to do that kind of work. So I feel there's if we look for systemic problems, there's probably something happening there.
Okay, so I'm going to latch onto something that you said, Matthias, where it says it's the most generic piece of feedback, but there's also a disconnection between an unstated expectation and the result. Because did the people before that feedback understand that that was what was expected? I know it's not a great definition, but was it ever, back to Jessica's point about clear definition of boundaries, part of that is also expectations. What do you need to cross? What do you need to connect? What do you need to be doing? And therefore what's expected, rather than hearing about it when there's a problem and it's thrown in with a whole bunch of other things and it doesn't necessarily make it very, very clear. I would like to, and I'd like to get everybody really thinking. I know that it's prescriptive, but I think I want to drive some of the conversation to say, given what we know, what would we suggest? What would we even think about experimenting in terms of being able to address the conflict, the misalignment, the communication problems, and all the things that come with people trying to complete a creative endeavor together, and the spectrum of people and the skills that we're going to need to be able to solve some of the problems that we have, like climate change and so on. So who wants to have a go?
Oh, JD has their hand up. I'm curious.
Go for it.
Okay, well, I'm not sure. Something that Matthias said about this, that the people who are in charge don't often have the same training and the same understanding of the system and how, I mean, I've run into this in my job a number of times now, and I saw a really interesting talk about Agile in enterprises and having a transformation office where teams who want to transform are, if the leaders want to transform something, they go to that office, and if people want to change something, they go to that office, and that kind of redirects some of the inclination to create these messes with reorganizing the people, which reorganizes the system and breaks all of the connections and twists them all up into a giant ball of, I don't know, systemic spaghetti. Anyway, it was a thought. I wanted to hear what people thought.
So you feel a need for changing something, and you go to that office, and they will support you, and how does that work?
Yeah, so there are people that say you go to an office of transformation, and they're the ones who help you create the kind of transformation that you want to create.
So it's like a team headed by Trond, and then they
Oh, best case.
Does it work? Has anybody? Yeah, have
Oh,
you seen
I have
that
to jump
working?
in.
Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I'm trying to understand how it would work.
I sure interpret it as bad, but I could get a wrong end of the stick. No, so I definitely wouldn't be in charge of that team. But there is some truth to it, though. That and I'm not saying that there's going to be a team that's going to help them transform, because they have to do the transforming themselves. But they maybe need some help and guidance on how to do it. But that would be just like managing the process or helping them with managing their process, not doing it. That would be crazy talk.
Or it could be if they, okay, let's assume good intent here, because as soon as I heard transformation office JD, my first reaction is like, what? And then I had to sort of back up here and assume that there is some space and good intention. It makes sense to, rather than everyone beat their own separate track for similar things, one person goes and, okay, they flatten the grass. The next person goes and you have a groove. By the time the third person goes, you're starting to get a path, or what we designers call desire lines. I'm sure you've seen them, where they have this beautifully architected lawn and pathways and everything, and then people walk across the grass because it's the shortest point between A and B. Architects used to fight. I'm talking about construction architects used to try and beat that out of people, and eventually now they've decided to make it part of their structure because they realize it's never going to stop, and it's an organic part of, you know, buildings and structures living after you've designed it and made the decisions that you've made. So there is a communal, united we stand aspect of that transformation office. But what I've personally seen happen is that it is used literally to squeeze the life out of anyone who actually wants to do the transformation and tell you all the reasons why it shouldn't, couldn't, wouldn't, you should never do it. So again, there's that, you know, duality that Rebecca brought up, and I observed, that how do you thread the needle between that to try and achieve the goal that you want to. So thank you, JD, for mentioning the transformation office. Anyone else?
I wanted to say something. You were coming in the near.
Okay.
I raised my hand, and then you told the sentence.
Sorry,
we didn't talk about the motivation. Why should I collaborate? I think this is the clue in almost everything: skin in the game and pain or need. Otherwise, why should I? Because somebody tells me in retrospective you don't collaborate, I wouldn't. I won't change anything. So I have to feel this need or have this need, and this is for me the question. This is why a transformation office, I don't know if it would work, because what is their need? They get money, or why should they? They don't have any skin in the game. They don't feel the need. I think this is where it should go. The question too: how should I design? Okay, what's the pain? What do I have? What do I want to solve? And can I? Is this organization ready for this? Or maybe it's a good old, I don't know which kind of organization would be better.
Maybe the transformation office is as good as it gets in some organizations, and
Yeah.
we should actually. I feel that maybe we were doing the quote I heard once was, if a waterfall project fails, then of course it failed because it was waterfall, and if an agile project fails, it fails because they didn't do agile right. So I feel we have this sort of maybe vibe towards something like transformation office. We're immediately feeling resistance. Maybe it's, you know, maybe it's a starting point. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe we do assume good intent, right? They're not setting that up to you know, destroy any transformation attempts. Might not be the best structure, but it could be a step forward. I don't know. I'm guessing. I'm just learning about.
So I think in order to assume good intent on anyone that I am collaborating with, I collaborate with a number of you on various things. It's like if I can see the benefit, but I tend to think a lot of it is where collaboration goes wrong is someone tells you what the benefit is. And that's, you know, kind of like Agile. I've been part of Agile transformations as an external person. And it's like, you know, maybe the way you're working is okay. You know, we don't need to transform or whatever. But have you thought about following through on this larger effort, or maybe you need some help here? So I tend to think that one thing about collaboration that needs to, you know, be kind of encouraged is it isn't us and them. And that's just really fundamental, whether it's on a team, whether it's between teams, whether it's business organizations. And whenever someone feels threatened or their position feels threatened, they are not in a collaborative mood. So getting things so that we don't feel afraid of, you know, we're going to be taken out. And that happens in a lot of organizations, you know.
You can't
It's
care
us
about the
or
wider
them.
system when you have to worry about feeding your family. That's just not, you can't think
You
at that
can't,
higher level
yeah.
when you're not safe.
Mm.
Ruth,
Ruth
you had your
wanted
hand
to
up.
say something, but now she is scribbling. You wanted to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I think the connection was between Matthias saying, you know, sometimes there isn't the design expertise, the organizational design expertise, and then JD mentioned the transformation office as a center of organizational design expertise that can be shared then across the organization. And, you know, I worked in one of those kinds of groups in HP. It was called the Software Initiative. And, you know, what we were doing was was learning from, as we worked with one group and bringing what we learned to other groups. And so, you know, we were like bees, you know, pollinating, but also very contextual and partner, you know, strong partner. So, yeah.
So I've been in those groups too, and you have to be very humble. And it's actually very interesting. And it's like, and you have to go live with those people. You can't just like, here, do this. So I tend to think collaboration is at a deep level is intense. And that doesn't mean that I'm there all the time, but I can't just be superficial about it. Being part of a central group sometimes is like really sucky because sometimes nobody wants what you have to offer.
So it's one thing that I heard was, yes, motivation is important. Yes, we need to do things together, but it almost has to be organic. It has to involve and be an intersection and overlap with the people that are involved, not imposed by the external system. But at the same time, to Jessica's point, if you can barely keep your head above water and you are in a situation where you're effectively in survival mode, then the only thing you're looking for is a beeline for the door, not to work with anyone or to do anything. So creating a space, having shared intent, values, whatever the case may be, and then everyone benefits, given the duality of collaboration, is a fine line to walk down. And I think this relates back to the point that you made right at the beginning, Jessica, where you said, depending on what level and where you are and who you're working with, collaboration, even though it's shared and it's common, will look very different. So I don't think that there is one answer. And yes, we need to learn all the different tools that we use, but respectfully look at them and look at the situation and match them together and not try to decide that, okay, this is definitely going to fit because I said so, or I have this amount of experience, or this is what we've always done. So your point about Rebecca being humble is we go in learning and listening, even with everything that we know. Any?
I would say this is a kind of collaboration, because if I am not listening, then I'm always and I'm out anyway. I refuse even the opportunity to collaborate. And if I'm not learning, then it's the same, because I would never change my mind. I would stay blocked in the bubble where am I, and then I cannot collaborate. If I'm not ready to make compromises or to learn, then no collaboration. Then it's a top-down or a one direction thing. And this is, I think, the definition of non-collaboration.
So we need some kind of structure. It needs to be flexible. We're not sure, well, there's proven structures that people have used, but it doesn't mean that it fits in that particular situation. We have a system which affects everybody, but in different ways, but we're all part of a wider system. And we're trying to create and bring into being a subsystem within that. And do that with multiple people, different roles, communication, all of that. We've been, I'll get to you in Rebecca. We've been doing this since we have come into existence. This is 2022. Why are we not better at that? And Rebecca, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, the thought occurs to me is that, and I'm just throwing this into the conversation about collaboration. There's deep collaboration, and then there's other, I'm going to say, formulaic or less intense collaboration. And if you look at team topologies, there are 3 different communication styles that they've identified between teams. Only one of them is collaboration. So it's not always that we're like intensely collaborating with everyone. On the other hand, I guess I worry about the people who are on the outside of teams trying to collaborate with the rest of us.
So there's a, sorry, go ahead, Matthias.
Well, I wanted to react to why aren't we any better at this, at collaboration than we were 100,000 years ago? We are better. The kind of things that we can do at the scale and complexity that we can do is fascinating. We have never done these kind of things in our history at this, you know, I'm thinking of Google and these things, or you know, sending stuff to space and all of that. It's fascinating. I think we're always expecting more. We're always trying to deal with bigger, more complex things. And that's why we're always struggling, because we're always operating at sort of the maximum of the complexity that we can handle. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to say.
Jessica?
What if we're not better at this because we're aiming for the wrong thing, because we're aiming for creation, because we're aiming for outcomes, and what we need is sustenance, is gardening. It is not creating a system or a subsystem, but growing the one we have into a place where it's both self-sustaining and produces enough outcomes to be profitable or whatever, so that we can keep playing.
I'm thinking about it.
Where's Romeo when we need him? Because we are capitalists. We don't want just to collaborate. We want power, money, whatever, growth. I think we are not so far yet to do it for the sake of feeling better. Or not many people are so well. Or you disagree? You say it's not true.
I think it's true. Remember, I think we have to embrace the duality aspect, but I think Jessica, you took me on a right curve there, because you're right. We're so focused on the creation. If you look at the life of anything that's in existence, it spends more time existing, being maintained, growing, eventually decomposing and dying than being created. And we're not looking at that part, and that's the majority part. And I think this is also part of the reason why we have the conflicts. To Trond's point, yeah, if we just reorganize and create anew instead of addressing the actual problem, then everything gets fixed. So yes, it's boring. Yes, it's not really exciting. It's not the thing that's going to make somebody cut you a $1 million check, Christina, to your point. But go for it, Jess.
It's not exciting to a capitalist. It's not exciting to an American, that's for sure, where it's all about the fruits of our labors. This week, the quote that keeps coming up for me is it's not about the fruits of our labors, it's about the work itself. And all that is ours is the work itself. And when we value that, then, I mean, it becomes, if not exciting, then fulfilling, satisfying, meaningful.
I totally agree. It's just not working that way yet. My opinion is we are, Matthias, right? We are very good in comparison with 10,000 years ago. But yes, we could be better. I think we have to unlearn this fighting for ourselves. So I wrote it in the chat. The first men, women, people were working were fighting to survive, and not caring for collaboration because it was not enough. We still don't have enough, and it seems that it takes very long to understand that a team is better as one person. And yeah, I don't know why, but the most people, we are still talking about ape developers and rock stars and whatever. I don't know why we are still talking about this, but this is the situation. We're still thinking one person is better as a team. So we don't need collaboration. We want that one rock star. Now, Trond or Jessica?
I think Jessica was before.
Is my hand still up? I'm sorry.
Okay, it's an old one.
An old hand.
Old hand. Yeah. I was thinking about what Matthias just said, that what we are actually capable of do as humans. It's really amazing. And I think it goes back to, at least from my perspective, it goes back to what Russell Acuff and Fred Emery was eminent about, that we as human beings are highly purposeful. We are an open open system, purposeful system. Which means that we are driven by purposes. And actually, they say in the right situation, we can be ideal seeking. We can look for ideals and try to reach them, like we are reaching the moon or building the huge ISS station together with the Russians and crazy ideas, right? So we can manage amazing things if we put our will and purpose to it. And I think I must say our industry are so stuck in a machine model that we think that we how frequently don't you hear that I'm just a cog in the machine, I can't fix anything anyway. So you just go about your daily work and just try to survive somehow, right? And I think we're so stuck in there that we don't see that we actually can rally around things and produce greatness also in our industry. But we are so reductionist. Our organization is reductionistly designed, so it's no wonder it's hard. But I think we need to break out of that, and rather sooner than later, because this is hurting us, to be honest. That was a small rant.
I think I use the wrong examples, the typical ones, right? Google and going to space, which are very technical things where you hire for people with the same set of, well, roughly a broad set of skills. But something like the European Union is probably the greatest collaborative peace project ever attempted, that is still running, that is a very diverse group of people doing that. And it's constantly under attack. It's constantly like, under attack and being changed and being people trying to do things, and it's incredibly slow moving and bureaucratic and all these things, but it's still here, and we still haven't had any wars since it was started. So yeah, now I've cursed it. But yeah, I mean, we're not terrible at it. We want more. we want to spread your opinion even further and have even more peace everywhere. That's what makes it hard. It used to be 12 countries. Now it's 27. We don't make it easier.
Yeah, so there's an aspect of fragility as well, because in that history of what is it, 70, 80 years, it was formed after the worst conflict that we had had in this part of the world, and everybody said no more. And so again, there was a common purpose. People were ready to work together. There was one, to Rebecca's point, they were all part of the same team, even though they were different. There were boundaries, there were things that got carved out. Okay, yes, we would agree, but then there are still 27 people that have to sit around the table and agree, and sometimes they disagree. And in some cases, like the country that I come from, they decided to leave, for good or for bad. So there's a state of, I think, flux. It's never stable, and that's one of the things that drives us crazy as people, because we want to control everything and have it defined, and it's stable and it never changes.
We want the illusion of linear progress. Always better.
Yeah, so I think personally, what I take away from this conversation is somehow figure out how to get people comfortable with chaos, but have some kind of structure. Hard thing to do, but again, thinking about the duality, closing our eyes and pretending and going la la la, it's not there, is just a road to disaster. And we're better off, sitting with it and looking at it and figuring out how we're going to have that relationship boundaried, if we can, with it too. So really coming back to inclusion, but including the things, even the things that we don't like chaos.
So one thing, and Alexi's, I welcome him to jump into the conversation here, that we haven't talked about in collaboration is when there's disagreement and different values. I can think about teams that I've worked on in the past where for whatever reason, this has just like torn up the team. And to the effect that they were just not, we were not working effectively. And it was kind of a painful, awful situation. It happens to be back in my engineering days at Tektronix when we were put together working on a new product development, and people just did not agree on approach. And you'd say, well, gee, wasn't it management's fault? No, it was the people were like, we're as polar as the political parties today on approaches. I have found that when it's like that, either you have to sort of do some kind of radical intervention, or you have to split people up. And I've been involved in both. I remember going and teaching a design class to folks at a product company that I used to work for. And it was clear that the two groups that were physically in different locations had widely different views about what was good design. And the only way I managed to point this out to them was they were writing on the whiteboard. This is back when we had physical locations and whatever. And one team used a red marker and the other team used blue. And I said, well, when you see their designs, you see red, which is like it makes you angry. And when you see their designs, it makes you blue, feel blue, like sad. And so just pointing out the fact that we had sort of different alignments made people, they kind of laughed when we had that revelation that I thought, wow, this is a great way to explain it to people. But I don't think that their fundamental values like mind melded and merged. What they did in order to solve this sort of different value set is to have them work on distinct parts of the system. So anyway, it's not always the case that we can get aligned, and collaborating when people have different value sets can be, I don't know, I'm going to say more trouble than it's worth. Be a little bit controversial here.
I think that's actually a good example of people bringing the whole self to work, not just the work part of to work.
My secret weapon is having a cognitive psychology degree in addition to my computer science. So I'm like aware that sometimes some battles are too hard to just, oh, let's just all get along. I think before I was 30, I saw things as black and white. And after 30, I started seeing shades of gray.
So that story that you tell, Rebecca, is actually quite apt, because it wasn't the project that was the issue. It wasn't even collaboration. Collaboration just showed and highlighted and shone a light on the different values. And if you didn't use a tool that addressed aligning values, then you were just on a road to nowhere. You could use everything else, but it wouldn't have the desired effect that people expected doing that work. So I think that if you have humans in a room and they don't have any kind of relationship or value system, or whatever you want to call it, then I'm with Rebecca. You might as well just close down whatever endeavor it is that you're trying to do at that point in time, because it will never work. That's one guaranteed valid observation that I've seen. If people are willing to work, and then DDD has the ubiquitous language and various things that address that relationship layer, then you're in a position where you could actually really work together. If you're not together, then you might as well just split the members of the team up.
And there are parts of the system that are sufficiently separable that people with different values can work on each of them and help each other without being tight collaborators and mind melding and merging.
So how do you recognize which is which?
You mean healthy conflict versus just misaligned values? I would ask the team. We know. Sorry.
Okay. And you're asking Rebecca why? Because you've observed it and you want to make them conscious of it, or to start the conversation?
Because you've observed it.
Okay.
A lot of conflict that doesn't seem to be going anywhere.
Christina?
Yeah, I also can answer your question and take on this discussion in the chat. Outcome, looking at the outcome, if they should work together and collaborate, and they don't, the outcome is isn't seen. But the output would be probably high, a lot of line of code, without any success, any real outcome. Delivering stuff without working with the other won't work. It probably will make more harm because you have something to maintain which is not needed. So this is the first signal. And the second one would be the famous metric number of WTF. How many people are conflicting and shouting and running around? But let's talk a little bit about effectiveness, because this is what the discussion was in the chat. What exactly is effective? And we have some contradictory sides on this. And Alexei didn't want to speak, but maybe you want now. If you want, you don't have to.
Yeah, I'm trying to come up with what we're aiming for, like what we mean by effective collaboration. Effective in terms of efficiency, efficacy, comfort for the parties involved, impact on the business. What's the result of effective collaboration? Because I keep remembering there is Doug Bowman's story. I don't know if you remember that, the chief designer of Google in 2009 who left the company, arguing about shades of blue. Do you remember the story? No?
Yep.
Basically, they did Gmail and ads and stuff like that, and he decided that they need to be either the same or too much different. Google engineers didn't believe him, and they run experiment with A/B testing different shade of blue on different user groups, and they proved with data that the one that he was proposing actually would cost $200 million a year for the company. And he wrote a goodbye letter, and he said, so they are testing 41 shades between each blue to see which one performs better. I had a recent debate over whether the border should be 3, 5, 4, 5 pixel wide, and was asked to prove my case. I can't operate in an environment like this. I've grown tired of debating such minuscule design decisions. There are more exciting design problems in this world to tackle. And Rebecca saying about designers just reminded me about this. And I'm just myself, like I'm looking for effective decision making through communication, of course. And I think I'm started to look for more objective criteria to make the decisions. And things like that, data-driven decision making makes collaboration really effective. But I want to ensure that we're talking about the same thing, because sometimes it would hurt people, right? Like he left the company and he went to Twitter, and people joke like Twitter has different shades of blue, but they have no money. Until recently, Musk bought them, so they probably have now.
As a designer, that's an interesting problem, well, an interesting description, because two things. As much as people, a lot of designers complain about developers, the wider population, if you look at their ability to be able to segment 41 different shades of blue, and you took the data for that, I would be interested to see what the actual information would be, but it would be a very small population of people who would actually make that separation, number one. Number two, just looking at an individual color, if you understand color theory and how contrast, I'm sure you've seen these optical illusions where you've got the same value of the color white, but depending on what it's next to, it will either look gray or brilliant white or even beige. So just looking at the individual, that just sent my spidey senses going. Talking about the individual color and not the rest of the system is a red herring as far as I'm concerned. I wouldn't even entertain that conversation as a designer. If the developers are coming and talking about, okay, here is the impact on the person who is using the system and how it's going to make it more effective and improve their efficacy, different conversation. And it's a combination of all of those things. But yes, I do remember that story, Alexi, and I think there was more to it than what he said, because it couldn't have just been that. So that was probably
I agree. What I mean is that what is the aim for what grade of effectiveness are we looking at? Should it be effective in the process? Should it be effective in the outcome? And what outcome we're looking for? Is it human interaction, or is it the business impact? Is this like a profit growing? Because every business operates for money. We shouldn't forget that we get paid to do our job. Right. And to me, like being part of the business, the efficiency in my work that includes collaboration needs to produce business outcome. If we are very efficiently communicating and the business is going down, I mean, it doesn't really matter. That's what
I see. Yeah.
JD.
Okay. Hi. I just wanted to give you my definition of effectiveness. I've got a big long doc that I was starting to work on a while back, but I think effectiveness in essence has to do with being able to learn collectively. I think there's a fundamental aspect of learning that must happen on a collective level. for something to actually be effective. And whatever that ends up meaning, there are all these different attributes that kind of tie into like being able to do that as an organization. And I just wanted to throw that out there.
So this almost comes full circle back to, you know, doing things together. What is that thing that people are doing together, right? And how does that balance against the equal and opposite reaction of working together, which is communication overhead, conflict, disagreement, differences, even down to the way that you do something, because you're going to have to agree, you know, if you're talking about developers, the style of which you code, in order for it to be aligned, means that somebody's going to be perfect for one person, it might not be great for someone else, and you're going to have to compromise in some shape or form and agree that for everything that is going to affect your outcome. And to Alexi's point is, what outcome are you aiming for? For myself, I start with looking at the person who's going to consume whatever this outcome is, or who it's aimed at. How is it going to impact and affect them? And then work my way backwards from that. And if the impact is exploitative or something that is not sustainable or any of those things, then I am imposing my value system on top of that, and they have to cross connect somewhere. If they don't intersect, then I will remove myself from that initiative, work, or action, to Jessica's point, and go and work somewhere else where there's a better personal and collective alignment as a principle. But I've had to learn that over a period of time and trial and error and figure out what that is.
So there's that safety thing again, or that's one of the requisites of the people can move themselves. They will naturally find places where their values align and they can contribute, because we all want to contribute if they have the opportunity and the safety to do that.
Yes, if you're surviving and trying to get your next meal, then very limited. Yeah.
I think it's not only surviving, but this trusting feeling. If I know I can discuss with you and maybe I am wrong, then I am open to collaborate. If I cannot be wrong because you go to my boss and tell him I was wrong, then I won't open my mouth and won't collaborate, but wait for Trond to tell me what to do. It was just a provocation. Let's say.
No, I just really like what you said, because one of the killers of effective collaboration in my mind is that the people, instead of talking to you directly about something they don't like, it could be the collaboration style. Like, people came to me years back and say, you're not collaborating well. Some people came to me directly. Some people came to me via my managers, and they usually go to their own manager. Their manager talks to my manager, and that manager talks to me. And it's a broken phone. The problem might even disappear in this collaboration if my manager is doing a good job, like explaining. But then the feedback doesn't come to me at all, or the problem exaggerates, which usually happens. Every step of the time, it exaggerates, and at the end, they come to you like, "What are you doing?" It's like, "What? I told them to rewrite this routine. It's not good enough." It's like, you're criticizing people's code, stuff like that, you know. So when people talk directly and they feel safe, I guess that's where we could come to long not forgotten psychological safety environment. That's where things that are uncomfortable can be freely discussed in a group.
I think it's a prerequisite. And now we are at DP2, or which level? This is a prerequisite to be able to talk directly with the people who are involved and not to 3 managers, because why should you? This is waste. If something is waste, then this is it.
Yeah, so actually I was sitting pondering that, because I was thinking an open question to you all. Do you think we organized our work well today? even in a good Agile shop? Are we doing it properly? Or there seem to be a lot of issues everywhere, to be honest. And yeah, we have to be better at collaboration. We have to collaborate more effectively, and There's always improving that collaboration thing. It's always seem to be a topic.
I think that some of that doing the Agile better is people always put the communication overhead that is required to do a good collaborative Agile project. That's the thing that is missing. That's where the money, quote unquote, Christina, to your point, they think they've saved it and they think it's a waste of time having that level, because that's the thing that creates the relationship space for such a fast moving, complex, flexible methodology, which is Agile. So you remove I think, Christina, you said it, you have the one-to-one, but it's more like, I've forgotten the theory, if you have two people in a team, it's one line. By the time you get to 4 people, it's like 13 lines of communication, and then so on. And then basically you cut all of that communication and then you're trying to do Agile and collaborate. It's not ever going to work. That's the cost and that's the tax for doing Agile, I think. And something that you said, Alexi, with the whole degrees of freedom is something I'm going to take some observation at. So trust is one-to-one. You look at someone else and you're talking directly to them. You do not talk to them through one other person or 3 other people. Then the level of trust is going to be much diminished. And how does that then, is there a limit to how much collaboration a person and a size of a team could do? And should we be looking at team units, not individual team members?
I think we focus too much on what you just said, Don, that we have 2 people, they can collaborate with 3, 4, 5. Oh, we need the Dunbar number. Now we can't have anymore. The team is too large now. I think, to be honest, I think that's a bit of a red herring. Also, the Dunbar number is questionable, but just give you an example. As I mentioned earlier, we had like a Duality. You, Alexei, know what that is, right? And there is like 40 people in the neighborhood rallying together, cleaning the outside, right? We did proper self-organization. There was no huge plan. And there was no one guiding us, saying you have to do that, you have to do that, you have to do that. It worked perfectly, and it scales because we rally around the same goal. We want to clean up, and then okay, I can do this, and you can do, and I see you do that, so I can help you there. And I mean, it seemed to like when we get to work, no, we can't be bigger than 5 or 6. That's impossible. I think, sorry, I don't think that's right, to be honest. We are not communicating all the time with everybody. That's not what we do. There was someone at the door, so I'll go ahead and check. Hang on.
Don't you have your?
I did. Okay, but I think Trond said something that was interesting. He said we don't communicate. It's not a solid line all the time. But I think there is a limit and a scope to how many lines we can have out at any time. And how do you sequence that and how do you manage that? But if you were a unit of 4, there's a famous story about, I think there were Google engineers who came as a pair and they basically worked together, which was very unusual. And they worked together until they were VPs and executives. Why don't we have more of that? Where you have your pod, almost unit of people, and you progressively work together and build something up. And then it doesn't have to be always the same person always responding. You have inbuilt that checks and balances, if you like, because it's never one person's opinion. You're always interacting with others, but consistently. And then, yes, you do have to collaborate with others, but then the overhead in just one person have to manage all those lines of communication is divided by a small pod of 3 or 4 different talented and different roles and responsibility people, but you have a unit. It's just an idea.
People usually call that nepotism, though. Unfortunately. Well, I like the idea. I would love that.
So that would be like teams, except at a level above line worker.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
But these teams would change or would have different touch points. I am working today with you, and tomorrow is working Matthias with you.
Yeah,
This is
because
what you-
maybe we're responsible for different things. It's something that Trond said that struck me. He said, okay, we self-organize, you do that. Somebody was still assigned to go and do one specific thing. You didn't have all 40 people trying to do the same thing at the same time. And there had to be a level. So you broke into pairs or threes or fours, and then you did a job that was, if you needed more people, then you would get more people together because it required that strength, ability, whatever it was. But there was a level of divide and conquer in order to be able to chip away at the problem. What you didn't have is some manager. You had an orchestrator as opposed to an imposed manager saying, you must do this and you must do that, and there's no compensation. That's kind of what I heard. So if you increase the surface area by having a set of people who work together, and then maybe not necessarily that it has to be the Dunbar number, Trond. And I think that it's something I'm thinking about, and I may do some more reading and experiments. But yeah, that might be another way to address. Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, one of the happiest projects I ever worked on was a small group of people where we knew the features that we had to deliver, and we had them in priority order. That sounds like, wow, we had a cut line of features. We had to at least get these done. And we picked them off and did them, and whoever did it didn't matter. We were not pairing because we were writing an assembly language. Pairing in assembly language is like kind of silly in my opinion. But anyway, we did this, and it was so happy because there was no ego involved. It was just getting the things done. I think those kind of situations are rare in the software world, but I had it once.
So what made that possible, Ruth? Rebecca?
Made that possible. I was the software project leader, and that's how I wanted to run things. So I kind of set it up with, I don't care who does it. It turns out if I had to go to meetings, then some junior person could write a lot of code. That's fine. We looked at each other's code. We had reviews. We played poker every day during lunch. It's a cohesive team.
Dave, because the suspense is huge.
Also on my side. So I have two remarks. So one was about the question or the remark from Trond. Is Agile really that much better? Of course not. I mean, even also in Agile, we still make a lot of mistakes. But I think, and I've experienced both the project way of working and the Agile way of working. The way I see it is that in the project way of working, we first set up a construct of communication and then try to do things in that construct. And that was really not that efficient and effective, and there was a lot of stuff there that didn't make sense. And I think in Agile, at least we try to flip that. So we try to do our job, and the moment we miss a certain level of communication, we invent it. At least that should be the idea behind it. And arguably things like safe and stuff like that aren't that Agile anymore. Regarding the remark of the question from Dawn, why aren't we doing that pair programming and mob programming and things like that more? Well, actually, if you look at extreme programming, which is one of the most agile versions of Agile that you can imagine, that's actually a core concept. Everything you do in pairs. and it works really well. The problem is that you need people with a certain level of experience and a certain level of maturity or ownership or stuff like that to make that actually work. And if you have less experienced people, it just, yeah, either you need to give them a lot of coaching or stuff like that, or you need to come up with a process to guide them, and then automatically you introduce a sort of forced method of collaboration, and then you have to be really careful to not create something that kind of beats the purpose again. So yeah, those were my 2 cents. I hope the suspense was worth it.
No, you said something really interesting, Dave, about experience. Can you unwind that? What does that mean? What is that a proxy for?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
That you said if people are experienced and have worked, then there's a gap that is addressed, or whether it's training or practice or something that then makes them better, makes them more effective at pairing, for example.
Good question. I'm not sure if I can really point my finger on that, but I'm actually now the product owner of a couple of engineers which have a huge amount of experience, and we created this well, even lighter form of extreme programming that we work in. It really just works really fast, and they do everything together, and they fly through all the topics that we need to cover. And we're actually, well, 1 month into the project and already approximately 1 month ahead of what we anticipated on our planning. So it just pays off. However, I do see that if I add another person to the team, depending on the experience and of the person, it will impact speed probably. And it will probably mean that we need to find at some point other ways of communication, other ways of alignment and things like that. And that will change the dynamics. And I'm pretty sure that if the team would be like 20 people, it will become really hard to keep this level of velocity. And I don't think it's just about the amount of years that you have developed. It's not about how well you understand Agile or something like that. I don't know what it is. Well, maybe it has to do with the trust and safety. How to what level are you able to trust your coworker to actually do the right things, and are you aligned with that? So that is, I think, hard to measure. You just have to experience that. Maybe that's it.
Thank you.
If I may, it's actually this Don. This I like I wrote in the chat. I experienced it myself, but Dan Northfeld formulated it better. He said, okay, you have 2 senior engineers, you put them to pair, amazing results really fast, and go to production straight away, no need for code reviews. You put very senior and very junior, one gets really like mind blown, really hardcore imposter syndrome, and another one gets bored. Don't put them in pairs. Keep the level kind of comparable. Junior and medium and senior. Said you put 2 juniors together to pair. A lot of fun. Never put it in production. That's what I remember. He made a talk about this. So I think it's about like, it should not be boring for one person and completely overwhelming for another. They will not like it. It should be somewhere that they both can contribute. I think the engagement comes from being able to contribute, and one person can't contribute because either spending too much time explaining what I'm doing or not understanding anything about it. Then it will be frustrating for both sides.
I think you're right, but because, like I said, I can't put my finger on it, but I do see that they're continuously challenging each other on a certain level, and a level that is completely out of reach for me, because I always say I'm not technical, but and especially not compared to them. But I see them challenging each other. I see them improving the stuff that they're building to the next level continuously in both ways. And that syncs up with your remark that you should be really careful about who you put together in a pair programming setting. And if there's a disbalance there, then it probably won't work anymore.
So in some ways, it comes back down to a type of relationship again, and the dynamics in order to make it fit. I will just interject one thing. One way that this is addressed with designers is that we have the tool of critique. So what happens there is you bring your work, you preface and say it will be in progress. So it's not quite like coding where you finish the routine and now you want to review. It's a time-bound thing, and because a lot of design is progressive, it's not iterating around the same thing and then polishing. It's actually making it more and more and more in focus. So the thing you made before, you literally chuck it away and then you make something else to represent it. So what you do in critique is that you bring that work that you have. You may have seen film critiques, for example, where they do the dailies. You will go through the scenario and then you will ask for specific feedback, and people will always give you a whole bunch of things anyway. And when you give feedback, it needs to be specific and it needs to be actionable. And it cannot be a criticism of the individual, their style, or anything else. So we've actually made what the developers call review. We've made it almost like an art form in order to be able to open up your work and get feedback and keep growing and progressing. And the thing about that is any designer can come in for critique. So it doesn't matter your level of experience, but it's time bound. It's 30 minutes, 1 hour at the most. And then there are rules of engagement, the relationship again, for how you proceed with that. And that's one of the ways that we learn from other people's techniques, perspectives, the way they even use tools, how they're thinking about a problem. And it addresses a whole wide range of challenges, because we don't just code. So I thought I'd throw that in there.
Alexei has asked for examples, and I have two, but maybe the most newest one. The company where I work for, we are a small company, 50 people or something, and we started with OKRs exactly 1 year ago, almost 10 months ago. And our first OKR planning took 1 week. We had, I don't know, 20 objectives. Everybody very excited and terribly tired. And after 3 months, we realized, we succeeded in 2 objectives or something. I don't know. The second quarter was 3 days or 4 days. Still much too many objectives, but we were up to 70% or 50% in realizing it. And this week, today, I finished the last planning for this quarter, and we almost didn't vote it anymore. We just had exactly the number we said we can take. We finished our planning in, I don't know, 4 hours with a lunch break and so on. It became very effective, not so tiring, but it took a lot of time because we had to learn to discuss, to collaborate, to work for the same goal. It wasn't at the beginning, it wasn't something totally new. And if you never did this, you can imagine to have the same goal with everybody else. And I want my feature and I want my goal and my objective. But what we cannot, in the second quarter was really cool. We cannot afford not to do this. Okay, but we don't have time and people to do it. No, we have to. So we didn't argue with data. We didn't discuss about data-driven decisions. We just said we have to do it. And of course we didn't. And we wasted time. And this waste of time, these days to waste time and energy, we wasted energy, taught us all to make lower goals. We had our first unintended moonshot. We wanted actually a normal goal, and we overachieved it, and it was great. This was something, and this was a lesson. Okay, it's okay if we go from lesser goals, and we have only 2 objectives in one team, and then we will be happy at the end. And this was the biggest motivator. And finally, after 9 months, we learned we can't wish to be able to do something. It won't work. Only because somebody said it has to, it won't work. So accept it and live with it. And this was the hardest part. To accept it and say, no, we are disciplined and we stay at the start. No, we don't start. We don't even start with it. And what we did the other things during the quarter, we were very we stopped working on things where we saw it won't work out. So we reduced waste in this way, but it works only with collaboration, and it was a hard lesson. But it can work out. And we are not we are different persons from different experience and everything. I don't think it's not the experience. The maturity, the intention is important. To having this one goal, we all wanted to make this work. And we wanted this because we were on the same level. Nobody told us you have to make this work. So it was intrinsic, it was our wish. That's it. I hope it helps. This is an example.
Yeah, I think I have exactly the same experience as you, but what I think is a fundamental factor to enable the progress in this is to establish a mutual ground of shared understanding of what the goal is. That's getting back to the definition of effective communication. It's like because this thing about we want this feature. So people need to learn to ask why, and other people who are willing this, they need to learn that people can ask why, and they should be prepared to support their decisions for prioritizing certain things that need to be done with data and the outcomes and impact. That's what Goika is doing with the impact mapping, right? You just don't throw things on the table and say we absolutely must do it. Exactly.
This is my OKR prerequisite. Nobody is creating an objective and here's that without metrics. These metrics, measurable numbers.
But what I'm saying that the whole group needs to agree that this is where we stand.
Yeah.
It might hurt.
Yeah.
But this is like, okay, and people need sometimes to be reminded about this. I am, because there is a conflict about, I'm standing on the software side. We fight between product features and technical upgrades. Both are important, but I also need to support my desire to do certain things technically. And one thing I learned talking to product people is that I explained one thing during last year, I think 15 times to the same people repeatedly, and the interval between these explanations was like less than a month. So that's why it took 15 times, so 12 months, something like that. And like in 3 week time, and they start asking me about the same thing again. What I learned that whatever I tell them, it just slips. They say, oh, it's technical upgrade, or they say this magic word, it's for scalability. Then they just stop listening. And it doesn't matter what I say. They just stop listening and ignore my words because the thing is too technical. And I read it on Twitter. I don't remember who that was. Maybe someone in this group is like, explain them in a way you expect them to like that. I don't even know. It's like it's empathy and maybe, and like try to put yourself in that position and what you would like to hear, what would you understand? Because repeating the same thing again and again, this like, you know, if someone doesn't speak English, what you try to do, if they don't understand, you try to say the same thing but louder many times. And I think that's what everyone is doing. Like I will tell you, don't you understand, stupid? So like, and you say the same thing, and they're stupid, they don't understand you, but they just don't get it, right? Or you have to put a different emphasis. You need to put it in a different formula. You need to put different words, like wrap it up in a way that's like there is a benefit for product in this technical things. We never do purely technical things, right? Unless we do a full rewrite. But it's also to make the product better. At the end of the day, it's the same goal. But that was my mistake. And I was absolutely sure, and I complained to my managers, like, why the hell I need to explain the same thing? They are not listening. Well, they are. I'm just not saying it right.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite people in the world, I happened to work with him for like 3 years, was a master at creating the right stories to talk about various features and capabilities to different audiences. And so he would actually build up a slide deck that told little animations and stories about things. And he would collect them. If this worked, then I can do this. And he would, even talking about the same set of features, like Jim would like just build it up in a way that he wanted to connect to you. And he was a chief business architect at Freddie Mac, where the single family home mortgage business. And it was really wonderful working with him on various, I was an external consultant for a few years, because I learned from him that there is not one right way to explain something. Even when you're talking to people that are in business or other analysts or technical folks, you have to tell the right story. You have to connect with them. And if you don't, it just doesn't work. So I really loved his, he used to have, the start of his deck was a picture of Mount Fuji, and then there's like artist that did like 64 different renditions of it. And he says, well, here, let's see if this works for you. And tries to tell stories to people that he connected with. And if he found a new way to connect to you, he would tell it that way and then capture it so he could maybe reuse it and tweak it again.
Yeah, so I think a lot of this comes down to one aspect that we've identified, which is the relationship. So Alexi, I've been in your situation where I feel like I've a broken record. I've said the same thing, and for whatever reason. And so I got curious and started asking why. In some cases, yes, they did what you said, and okay, they stopped listening. In other cases, they didn't want to say that they didn't understand. They were desperate, panicking, but wouldn't say that. And so then I realized, so I need to reframe. In some other cases, like Rebecca said, it was literally finding the right story to tell people. And I will give you an example. I don't even remember the question that was asked. And it was about an architectural set of decisions at the time. And I had to come up, my gut answer was, are you crazy? But I couldn't say that, okay? So how do I tell this person absolutely, categorically no from my position? Obviously, they were the one that was in power, okay? So I said, let me think a little bit. And the analogy I came up in the end, because they were building their own house. I said, how would you feel if your carpenter came to you and said, we're going to put in half the windows, the top half in your house, all of them, and then we'll come around and we'll put the bottom. And he started looking at me and said, what the hell are you talking about? Exactly, this is crazy. So I said, so he said, why would they do that? I said, that's exactly what you just asked me to do. And yes, it was a little bit funny, humor and all the rest of it. And he said, yeah, but possibly could you? And then we started talking about the forces of the house and the fact that it wouldn't be watertight and all, nothing to do with the topic. But that really helped that manager to build a mental model for the problem without ever talking about that particular architecture. And it's very similar. What Rebecca said reminded me of that. So it comes down to being human, and you're talking to another human, and you have to talk at that level. So I think, I know we've got a few minutes and maybe we need to start to wrap up, and I'd like to hear everybody's conclusions. Is what I've taken away is it's about humans, and it's about groups of humans and how we operate as groups of humans doing a bunch of stuff. And then to Jessica's point about sustainability, think about the after, not just the act of making, because that is just as important and we ignore it. So hand back to whoever wants to respond or ask a question even.
I just remember about this analogy that I did the same analogy to an engineer who didn't want to do like until the end thing, right? And I say, what would you say to a person who is doing the tiles in your bathroom if they just put like broken tiles and stuff like that? He said, as soon as it's behind the toilet, I don't care because I'm not gonna ever see it. And that's the risk, because we keep leaving these holes everywhere that suddenly they start to leak, right? It's just, it won't happen on my watch. I'll sell the house by that time. I don't care. And so I'm being a bit careful about this.
But I would disagree, because you can tell him, okay, but you give me, you created this and you have to be responsible for it at least for 2 years or something. So you have some obligations. You are not only a one-time contractor and that's it. You have some obligation. You have to deliver a good work, because otherwise I don't pay you. So you can make it
if you would
come
find
an
out.
outcome.
Yeah, I understand.
And this
But
is
he was speaking as the owner of the house, and I was saying that you doing maybe okay, you're doing the work for yourself. So apparently, it just transpires to what he would do himself in his own house. So if he's not finishing his job in software, why would I expect him to do a better job in his house? It's the same stuff. So our experience is people doing one thing, it probably translates to some other thing, unless they are completely incompetent, like they can't cook, right? You just can't blame person for that. But if they like saying I can cook but do a rubbish job on that, they probably suck at all other jobs. I don't know.
I don't know why I have a husband who can cook and that's it. Can make photos very good, but can do other stuff what I would expect, like cleaning. So I wouldn't jump to such a conclusion that this is what I wanted to say. If we are empathic and we have a common ground like outcome, then maybe we can put the base for a collaboration. And if we stop putting people in not closets but in corners or something, we shouldn't put our expectations on anybody else, because it is our expectation. It's our failure. Why do we have this expectation without making it clear, having such a kind of contract or something? So if we need rules, we need empathy and patience and openness, of course, to do this extra effort, because it won't work but like magic. It won't work. We are not used to discuss so much and we are not used to respond to challenges. It is so hard to be challenged, and I'm challenging everybody and everything, and it's really hard. I see all the time this pushback, but I don't challenge the person. I challenge the thoughts or the idea or the outcome. This is hard. This has to be learned. And without that, we cannot collaborate. We can just be nice to each other or not nice to each other, but we won't get to the same common good.
Okay, so I think I would like to ask everyone, just wrapping up, 3 words to describe collaboration. I saw Jessica's face. I won't pick on you first. 3 words to describe collaboration, given all the conversations that we've had. So, Trond, I'll start with you.
Right. Drop something. 3 words. I would like us to be more participative, focusing on participation, that everybody's in, and that we share the same purpose, that we are rallying around that. So participation and purpose, and also removing the hierarchy. So those things I would actually hope that we can go for. That's what I've sort of alluded to earlier about the organization. It wasn't about Agile versus project, by the way. It was more, do we still think that the way we organize work today actually is the best way, or is there option or other options? And I don't think we have explored those other options, to be honest. We still work in the hierarchy, or bureaucracy, sorry. Yeah.
Rebecca?
I'm going to use a couple of words very quickly. One of them is cooperation, and the other is assuming intent, good intent. So that's good intent. So those are 3 words. Yeah.
Okay. Ruth.
Relationships we repair. If I could have a few more, I'd say, but relationships we build and repair. But
Okay. Jessica?
Two concepts stuck with me, close enough. Enlargement of potential and blame magnet.
Okay. I'm gonna resist because we're always trying to close out here. Alexis?
Rules of engagement.
Okay. JD?
Compassionate collective learning.
Cool. Dave?
Well, it's a topic we haven't really touched, but I think be clear about expectations.
Okay. I'll say learning isn't waste. And then Christina, I hand back to you.
You used all the words.
We only use like 3 each or 2 each.
Maybe respect is missing.
Okay.
And empathy, we use the word quite often today, but it works hand in hand, maybe.
All righty.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Really interesting and cool, and this is maybe the perfect way to close the channel, the YouTube channel, the streaming. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Until the next time.
See you. Thank
Bye.
you, everybody.